Have you ever noticed how someone can be completely interested in you one moment, engaged, curious, responsive, and then suddenly, almost without warning, their energy shifts, their replies get shorter, their attention drifts, and it feels like something just disappeared, and most people immediately assume it's because they're not interesting enough, not attractive enough, or that they did something wrong. But that's rarely the real reason, because people don't lose interest randomly, they lose interest psychologically. And once you understand how that process works, you start to realize that attention isn't something you chase. It's something you create and maintain through very specific signals. And if you want to understand why people lose interest quickly, you have to start with one of the most important principles of human behavior, which is that the brain is constantly seeking stimulation but quickly adapts to it, meaning that what feels exciting at first can become normal very fast. And once something becomes predictable, the brain reduces its attention toward it, not because it's bad, but because it no longer feels new. And this is known as hedonic adaptation, where the mind gets used to a stimulus and stops reacting to it with the same intensity. And this is why initial attraction often fades if nothing changes, because the brain is wired to notice contrast, variation, and novelty. And when interactions become repetitive, overly predictable, or too available, they lose the psychological tension that keeps attention alive. And this leads to one of the biggest mistakes people make, which is overexposure. Because when you are always available, always responding instantly, always giving the same energy, you remove any sense of anticipation, and anticipation is a key driver of interest, because the brain becomes more engaged when there is something to look forward to, something slightly uncertain, something that isn't fully predictable. And this doesn't mean playing games. It means understanding that space creates value, and when there is no space, there is no room for curiosity to grow, and curiosity is another major factor in maintaining interest, because people are naturally drawn to what they don't fully understand, and when everything about you is immediately revealed, explained, or constantly expressed, there is nothing left for the other person to explore. And this is why mystery, not in a manipulative sense, but in the sense of pacing and gradual disclosure, plays a powerful role in attraction and engagement. And then there is the issue of emotional intensity. Because people don't stay interested in neutral experiences, they stay interested in experiences that create emotional variation. And if every interaction feels the same, flat, predictable, or overly safe, the brain starts to disengage, because it doesn't detect anything meaningful to focus on. And this is why strong connections often involve a mix of emotions: interest, curiosity, slight tension, comfort, because variation keeps the mind engaged. And then there is the concept of perceived value, because people assign value not just based on what something is, but based on how rare or effortful it appears. And when something feels too easy to access, too guaranteed, or too predictable, the brain subconsciously lowers its perceived value. And this is why people often appreciate things more when there is some level of effort, uncertainty, or progression involved. And this ties into another important mechanism, which is investment, because the more someone invests their time, attention, or effort into something, the more value they assign to it. And if one person is doing all the effort while the other is simply receiving, the imbalance can reduce interest on the receiving end, because they haven't psychologically invested enough to feel attached. And this is why balanced interaction is critical, where both sides are contributing, engaging, and participating, creating a dynamic rather than a one-sided exchange. And then there is the role of self-perception, because how you see yourself influences how others perceive you. And when someone constantly seeks validation, overexplains, or tries too hard to maintain attention, it can signal insecurity, and the brain tends to interpret that as lower status or lower value, even if unintentionally. And in contrast, when someone appears comfortable, grounded, and not dependent on external approval, it creates a sense of stability that others are naturally drawn to. And this is why confidence, especially quiet confidence, plays such a strong role in maintaining interest, because it signals that you are not trying to force attention, but allowing it to happen naturally. And then there is the importance of progression, because interest thrives when there is a sense of movement, growth, or development. And if interactions stay in the same place without evolving, the brain starts to categorize them as static. And once something feels static, it loses its priority in attention, because the brain is always looking for what's changing, what's new, what's developing, and this is why conversations, relationships, and interactions that evolve over time tend to maintain interest more effectively than those that remain repetitive. And another layer to this is cognitive effort, because people are more engaged when they are mentally involved in an interaction, and if everything is given too easily, with no need for interpretation, thought, or participation, the brain becomes passive, and passive engagement quickly turns into disinterest. And this is why subtle challenges, thought-provoking conversations, or moments that require attention and response can actually increase interest, because they activate the brain rather than letting it drift. And then there is the role of attention economy, because in a world where people are constantly exposed to new stimuli, notifications, content, conversations, the competition for attention is higher than ever, and this means that maintaining interest is not just about being good. It's about being engaging enough to stand out among many competing inputs. And this doesn't require being extreme or exaggerated, but it does require being intentional, present, and slightly unpredictable, because predictability fades into the background, while variation stands out. And however, it's important to understand that losing interest is not always something you can control, because people's attention is influenced by their own internal states, priorities, and circumstances. But what you can control is how you present yourself, how you manage pacing, how you create emotional variation, and how you maintain your own sense of value without overextending yourself. And once you shift your focus from trying to hold someone's attention to creating interactions that naturally sustain it, everything changes, because instead of chasing interest, you start generating it. And once you understand that attention is not about constant presence, but about meaningful presence, not about saying more, but about creating impact, you begin to interact differently, more intentionally, more effectively, and more authentically. And once you see how these subtle psychological dynamics shape interest, attraction, and engagement, you start to notice them everywhere, in conversations, in relationships, in everyday interactions. And once you understand why people lose interest quickly, you can't unsee it. So if this video helped you see things differently and gave you a deeper understanding of human behavior, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more insights like this. Because once you understand psychology, you start to understand everything.